Welcome to the Center for Universal Oneness. We are an open, welcoming, spiritual community that supports all faith traditions and invites you to join us on your spiritual journey. We host different speakers each week to guide and inspire us. We are guided by universal principles of acceptance of all that is sacred, and we strive to live in the oneness of love. Please enjoy this presentation.
Well, this morning we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Reverend James Gaither. Dr. Gaither is a friend of us, and we have been blessed to have his presence and his knowledge shared with us on numerous occasions. And he has been an ordained unity minister for a long time, taught in unity and spiritual education for 25 years. He's been a senior minister in unity churches for over 12 years. He's published a couple of books. He's been a regular contributor to the Unity magazine, and he's been the recipient of the Charles Fillmore Award for Visionary Leadership from the Unity Worldwide Ministries. It's our pleasure, Jim, to have you again. Your topic is faith and hope as the first week of Advent.
Yep. Today, the necessity of hope and the power of faith. There's a saying that where there's life, there's hope. And this is true even of people who are oppressed. In fact, oppressed peoples have made some of the greatest contributions to culture. You might think of America's enslaved Africans and their descendants who gave us all kinds of contributions to culture, and including some of my favorite gifts, their wonderful music, spirituals, blues, and jazz. The Israelites, whose descendants wrote the Bible, were first enslaved by Egyptians. They were conquered and enslaved by Assyrians, and then Babylonians, and Greeks, and Romans. And through all their times of tribulations and oppressions, the Jewish people have produced some of the most influential spiritual writings in the Western world. Their consciousness of God has produced three great world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Their writings, the Hebrew scriptures that we find in our Bible, come from a consciousness of hope and faith. Today is the beginning of the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah and also the Christian celebration of the Advent season. Well, these don't always start together because the Jewish calendar changes, but it's interesting that both this year start today. I'm going to focus on today just on the Advent themes of hope and faith. And I'll begin by considering some Hebrew scriptures that express the messianic hope. We read in the second Psalm these words: "I will tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's wheel." Another messianic passage, or one that's been interpreted as being about the Messiah, is found in Psalm 89. It says, "I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I've sworn to David, my servant, I will establish your descendants forever and build your throne for all generations. I have found David, my servant. With my holy oil, I have anointed him. He shall cry to me, thou art my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. And I will make him the firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever, and my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his line forever, and his throne at the days of heaven, of the heavens." And one more passage. This is found in the book of Isaiah. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. Now, Jewish and Christian biblical scholars agree that this passage from Isaiah was actually about King Hezekiah. Hezekiah was one of the best kings of Israel, one of the better kings anyway, at least by Isaiah's standards. Later, when Christians were searching Hebrew scripture for texts they could interpret as being about Jesus, this passage from Isaiah and the passages from Psalms fit their belief that Jesus was the Messiah, the Christ. These passages were, though, originally written about King David and the hope for the establishment of his royal lineage, and about Hezekiah, who was part of that lineage. But later Christians interpret them all as being about Jesus, who they believe fulfilled the scriptures. In fact, all the passages early Christians saw as prophecies fulfilled by Jesus were originally either about David or one of his royal lineage. The words Christ and Messiah mean the same thing. It's just a difference between Hebrew and Greek. They mean anointed, which means to rub with oil or to shine. Apparently, the idea was that by putting oil on the heads of priests and kings, it made their heads shiny, which suggested a light emanating from their heads. The word oil can also mean greasy, so we could say that the anointed of Israel were the first greasers. Here we see the original idea of the king being figuratively the Son of God. We can see this we can see that this is figurative from the wording. I will make you my son, future tense, even though the king at that time was already born, obviously. So even when the psalmist has God say, today I have begotten you, it is clearly a figurative meaning since the king was already alive. The king had already been born, already been begotten in the human sense. So we could say he is being born again. But it has nothing to do with accepting Jesus, since Jesus hasn't yet appeared. So we see there are two very different interpretations of scriptures in Judaism and in Christianity. Passages that Jews interpret as being about a future Messiah. Christians interpret as being about a past Messiah, Jesus, who would come again to finish his work. And what these interpretations have in common is the idea that a Messiah will come to set the world right, that the Messiah will come in the future. Did the psalmists and the prophets who proclaim these things proclaim from a state of faith or a state of hope? Did they really believe in this future Davidic kingdom, or did they only hope it would happen? Well, the authors probably believed, but there's really no way of telling. What we can be sure of is that those who proclaimed these things, at the very least, hoped for a Messiah and gave that hope and that inspiration to others. While originally these prophecies and statements were about living people or hoped for human leaders, eventually the idea of the Messiah took on a supernatural dimension in the consciousness of the people. This messianic supernaturalism emerged during what's called by scholars the Intertestamental Era. That is the era between when the last official book of Hebrew scriptures was written and the era when the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, written. And this was also the era, by the way, in which the Jews had the great triumph against the Greeks that is celebrated during this Hanukkah season. Well, in any case, in those days, people began to form the idea that the Messiah would not only be a great king, but would be a divine figure, more literally the Son of God. The supernatural Messiah idea is found most explicitly in the writings of that era, the intertestamental era, in such books as the books of Enoch and various others, as well as in untitled texts that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this idea was emerging in this period. The writings of this period are probably the main basis for the Christ or Messiah ideas that are found in the New Testament. Gospels were written after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 66. During the war that preceded that destruction, a few military figures emerged from among the Jews who had some military successes and were thought by some to be the promised Messiah. However, when Rome crushed the rebellion, they also crushed the idea that any of the Jewish military leaders were the Messiah. Now, the defeats of the military Messiah, proposed messiahs in that era, opened up a space, we might say, in the minds of the people for a non-military interpretation of the Messiah, the Christ. And this space was filled by the Christian interpretation of Jesus as Messiah. Jesus was the only proposed Messiah of the era to not lead a military revolt, and therefore, consequently, he was the only one not to lose a war. And of course, the disciples' claim that Jesus was resurrected and would soon return was very appealing to many of the Jews of that era. That story, the resurrection story, also appealed to Gentiles. For in those days, there were several religions constructed around mythological stories of gods and goddesses who rose from the dead. So the Greek world was familiar with this idea. And the story of Jesus as something that recently happened was obviously very powerful and appealing for them. Judaism, meanwhile, other Jews continued to hold to the hope that someday Messiah would come and set things right. Interestingly, many modern Christians have basically the same hope. That is, they hope that someday Christ will return and set things right, their idea of the Messiah. The first advent of Christ in Christian thought was the prelude to the second advent, when Jesus would return to judge the world. However, when we read closely the Gospels, we see that Jesus himself had a somewhat different idea about all this. He said regarding the end of days, or when the Messiah would come, he said, "It won't be here or there, for the kingdom of God is within you." Jesus had something more than hope. He had faith that God's realm was already present, that God was already present, that God was already, in effect, ruling the way things work. And so we can interpret his sayings and his parables as really being about something already present and the way things work, the ways of justice, the ways of love and forgiveness. His original disciples may well have understood this, but later generations came to different conclusions. Christians had faith that Jesus was the Christ, yet they also interpreted Jesus later as talking about the future. And so in effect, they ended up with the same hope and expectation that the Jewish people had, which is to say, a Messiah will come in the future. Now, I've been speaking about these messianic hopes, but haven't yet explained my views on what hope and faith are and how they are different. And I believe it's important to be clear about these terms, about these states of consciousness, because there's a significant practical difference between hoping something will happen and having faith that it will happen or has already happened, is already true. Psychologically, hope and faith have varying degrees. Hope can be passive or active. Faith can be a future expectation or a present belief. Hope is an aspect of will and desire. Faith is an aspect of thought and feeling. So consider what I mean by passive hope. Passive hope is just wishing that something will happen to save us. Well, the only benefit of this passive hope is that it's better than being hopeless. Hopelessness can lead to depression, despair, or worse. So psychologically, even a little hope is better than none at all. In fact, I would claim that even passive hope is necessary for survival. Having this hope is how Jews and Judaism and all oppressed people have survived, have continued despite their tribulations. They kept hope alive. And in keeping hope alive, they left behind thoughts and ideas, beliefs that have inspired later generations, not only of their own people, but of other peoples. So passive hope is necessary. But there's also what I call active hope. Active hope can be a motivation to do something to improve our conditions. Passive hope wishes for wealth. Active hope buys lottery tickets. Passive hope just waits to be saved. Active hope can move us to try to do something about our conditions. In that sense, active hope can be like faith. Well, for example, just a simple example, when someone hopes that some trial drug will cure their illness, they may enter into the trial in the hope that they will get the new drug instead of the placebo and that it will work. So entering into a research trial is an action. It is demonstration of active hope. We usually associate the placebo effect with belief. You say, well, it's because it works because people believe. On the other hand, people who enter into these trials have no real reason to believe that they will receive the active drug. That's not guaranteed. So I suspect that a person who just hopes they'll get the real treatment and hopes that it will work can have the placebo effect and a cure. In other words, it may be that mere hope can sometimes have a healing effect on us. So let's consider now the idea of faith. The least effective or lowest level of faith is positive mental expectation based on nothing. We call this blind faith. It is faith without any reason or without any evidence. Some people think this is the only kind of faith there is. I say it's the lowest level because it is as likely to be disappointed as fulfilled and can even be dangerous. For example, blind faith in a corrupt leader is the seed of tyranny. However, blind faith can also, like active hope, lead to beneficial action. We can look at, and again, the same sort of situation that we talked about with active hope. Blind faith can motivate people to participate in health research and experience a cure through the placebo effect. So blind faith and active hope can have positive effects in our lives. The difference between an active hope and a blind faith is actually fairly subtle. But if you examine your own feelings, your own awareness, you know the difference between hoping and expecting. It's a subtle difference, but it's known to us. Blind faith, positive expectation, feels a bit more certain about the future than does even the strongest hope. But there are higher levels of faith. Blind faith isn't the only kind of faith. A higher level of faith is confidence. Confidence in God, confidence in yourself, confidence in other persons, or in an expected outcome are usually based on something. The something may simply be strong intuitions. It may be experiences we've had. We may have reasons for having confidence. Sometimes we simply have confidence because we have confidence in people who are in authority or we consider to be authority. When they say things, we accept them as true. We have confidence in their expertise. This is the kind of faith, this confidence, this level of confidence that most Jews and Christians and Muslims have in their religious beliefs. Confidence is not entirely blind. It has some basis. Now, this basis of this kind of faith, this confidence, does not rise to the level of proof or certainty. So we may say it has a stronger level of probability to make something happen. When we have confidence, we believe it is probable that something is true. It is probable that we can accomplish something, or it is probable that something will manifest. And more often than not, we find our confidence is justified by results. So confidence has probability on its side. Confidence is an element or a dimension or a level of faith. But even confidence is sometimes misplaced. Sometimes things don't work out regardless of our confidence. So there's yet a higher level than confidence, a higher level of faith. That is faith as conviction. Conviction is based on strong evidence or sound logic. Now, this does not mean that all convictions are ultimately true, even at that. That what we are convinced of is the case or will happen. However, conviction is based on the best known evidence, and it is almost always correct. When you have faith in something because it's based on the best known evidence, it has a very high probability of being practically effective, higher probability of being practically effective than does mere confidence. It does not indicate expertise, but does indicate a level of understanding that rises to a higher level of probability that what we have faith in is justified and will result in our expectations or our achievements. It's based on the idea of achieving. The highest level of faith is certainty, and so is a kind of knowing. For example, observable facts are certainties, and we have faith in them because of that. Mathematical truths are certainties, and so we have faith in mathematics. Sound logical arguments are certainties, even though sometimes it's difficult to tell when an argument is sound and when it is not. Another way of seeing this is when we look at it in terms of science. We don't think of science as being faith, but in fact, a lot of what science is faith. Some of what science is certainty. Science has certainty about certain facts, but there is also uncertainty about some widely held theories. Scientific theories sometimes must be modified because new facts come to light, or because someone finds a logical or mathematical flaw in the theory. So scientific theories are convictions, whereas scientific facts are certainties. It's a way of sorting out, again, this subtle difference. And we ourselves can be certain about certain things. For example, as Descartes pointed out, we can be certain of our own existence. I am. Of this much I am certain. We can be certain that the universe exists, but we may not be certain about its fundamental nature, simply because there are competing theories about what is the fundamental nature of reality in both science and philosophy. So we may have convictions about the fundamental nature of things, but we don't necessarily have certainties. And this brings us again to the level of spiritual consciousness. Mystic, who has a direct experience of union with God, may very well have certainty about the existence and the nature of God. If we ourselves have not had that same experience, we can still have faith in what the mystics tell us. The mystics of all religions have fundamentally the same ideas about the nature of God. And so we can learn from them. We may begin at a level of just simply having blind faith. We may have confidence because we see some reason or some basis to trust the mystical experience. We can even have conviction about the testimony of mystics, perhaps from our own experience or from our best reasoning. But we don't have the level of faith that is certainty of the mystic until we ourselves have such an experience. We can have a high level of faith in the Messiah idea, the Christ idea, if we interpret it differently than conventional Jewish and Christian interpretations of Messiah, because there is another interpretation of Messiah or the Christ idea, an idea of a Messiah that's different than a hope or an expectation of some future being to save us, supernatural or otherwise. There's another interpretation of the Messiah or Christ idea, and it's an interpretation in which we can have faith based on experience. It's an interpretation that is neither exclusively Jewish nor Christian. We can interpret the Messiah or Christ idea as the presence of the divine within us. That is how Jesus interpreted it. He talked about the realm of God as within us. The realm of God, the kingdom of God is within you. And so we can follow the teachings of Jesus and others we see as great spiritual teachers or spiritual masters. We can practice the teachings of love and faith and wisdom. We can meditate to seek the mystical experience of union with the divine, the consciousness of that unity with the divine through prayer and meditation. And when we follow these basic spiritual teachings, we ourselves become the Messiah, the Christ. Growing in spiritual consciousness, we can manifest more love, peace, joy, and healing in the world. We can do the work of the Messiah. And so, at least to a degree, we can be the Messiah now. We can be the Christ now. This possibility of developing a consciousness of love and peace and joy and wisdom and healing, this possibility is open to everyone. It's open to Jews, it's open to Christians, it's open to everyone. Because hope and faith, love and peace, joy and wisdom are not the exclusive property of any religion. These states of consciousness are available to all. Jews believe they are called to repair the world. That's one of the fundamental ways Jews talk about that what their faith is. They're called to repair the world. And is that not a calling we all have? And is that not the work of the Messiah? This Christ idea of the Messiah within us is an active hope. It moves us to act. It is the faith or conviction or even the knowing of the Messiah, the Christ within us. For as we experience practical results through spiritual practices, we have direct knowledge of what the Messiah is in us. We experience what St. Paul called Christ in you, your hope of glory. We can realize that we are the sons and daughters of God, and that this day God has begotten us. How can we grow in hope and in faith? How can we move up those levels of faith and have an active hope? Well, it all begins in our own consciousness. Hope comes from taking seriously your desires and your needs. That seems to be an obvious thing, but a lot of times people don't take seriously their own desires, their own needs. Passive hope is an awareness of desires and needs, an awareness of it. An active hope comes from the will to pursue fulfillment of those desires and needs. Hope is related to desire and will. Sometimes people with passive hope need some assistance. So whenever we give of our resources to support those in need, we also give them hope. This powerful, though they have the hope within them, but we help to spark it, this powerful element of consciousness that moves us forward. If you are feeling somewhat hopeless at any time, pay attention to what you truly want in life. Then set your attentions on getting what you really want. Make your hope active. Do not ignore your desires. Do not give up on them. Do not think of yourself as unworthy of good. For as the Desiderata says, you are a child of the universe. You have a right to be here. You have as much right to fulfillment of your hopes, your desires, as anyone does. Now, we might ask the question, are some desires bad? Of course. However, you can discern which desires are beneficial by reflection, and you will find that most of your hopes are positive. You can ask the question simply, will the fulfillment of this desire harm anyone? Will it benefit me or benefit others? Because if it won't harm others and it will benefit you or others, the desire is worth pursuing. The hope is worth acting upon. As you pursue your desires, you may sometimes find your pursuit temporarily thwarted. But if you continue in hope, if you continue in the directions of your dreams, you will experience some successes that will build your confidence, that will strengthen your faith. As Thoreau said, if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with success unexpected in common hours, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. This license of the higher order of beings. Intentionally move from blind faith to understanding faith. Learn to achieve what you want to achieve. You can learn through study. You can learn through experience. Practice may not make perfect, but it does improve our skills. It does strengthen faith and make it more powerful. Faith has the power to heal as Jesus healed. Faith has the power to repair the world. The same divinity that we see in Jesus and other great spiritual teachers is also in us. The more faith we have, the more we experience and express that divinity that we are. There is, as the name of your organization says, there is universal oneness. We are interconnected with everything that has ever been or ever will be. I would consider this a scientific fact. We are interconnected with everything that ever has been or ever will be. We are connected to the courage of David, to the wisdom of Solomon, to the prophetic consciousness of Isaiah, to the Christ in Jesus. As Emerson wrote, there is no great and no small, to the soul that maketh all. Where it cometh, all things are, and it cometh everywhere. I am the owner of the sphere, of the 7 stars and the solar year, of Caesar's hand and Plato's brain, of Lord Christ's heart and Shakespeare's strain. So let this Advent season be for you a reminder that the Christ, the source of infinite life, love, and light, the fount of hope, faith, peace, and joy, is perpetually being begotten in you. And now I'd like you to join with me in a time of meditation on these things. I invite you to take a few moments to turn your attention inward, to find a comfortable position to begin to relax. In this time of meditation, we set aside all concerns about outer conditions. We take a few moments to become mindful by first focusing our attention on our breathing. It's not necessary to try to control your breathing or to not control it. Simply let it be as it is. Allow the rhythm of your inhalation and exhalation to take on a natural and comfortable pace by simply being aware, feeling your breathing. This breath is a flow of life. This breathing is part of what connects us to all things, to the atmosphere of the earth, to all life on earth. And this atmosphere contains the warmth, the sun, the energy of life. So we relax into a state of peace. We relax into our consciousness of our interconnectedness, of our oneness with all life. We let ourselves, our attention, move more deeply inward. Become aware of the flow and the flux of our thoughts and feelings. We let them flow. We do not grasp them. We do not push them away. We do not judge our thoughts and feelings now. We simply observe them. And as we observe our thoughts and feelings, our minds become ever more still. We observe without judgment, without grasping, without resisting. Thoughts settle into a state of peace and openness. The depths of our consciousness, in our hearts, in our souls. This is where we know our oneness with something greater even than the physical universe. Oneness with the infinite mind or spirit that is the source of all, that contains all, that permeates all, that is greater than this vast physical universe that we perceive with our senses. There is this deeper reality. You've known this all your life at some level. The level of your intuition, you've known there is more to you than is contained between your hat and your boots, as Whitman said. There is more to you than this body, than your personality, than your name or place in the world. There is this consciousness that knows all this, that is deep, infinitely broad. Source, perceiver, experiencer of all things, all knowing, all presence, all power. Here and now, we are one with this. In fact, this is what we are at the deepest level. In this knowing is reason for confidence, reason for hope. In this knowing, we realize we can draw upon this infinite power because it is what we are. This power expresses in us, as us, and through us. This is the all-knowing. This is the all-wise. This is the all-loving. It's always with us and within us. This is the true fount of hope and faith, of peace and joy, of love. We know our connection now ever more deeply. I invite you to consider your dreams, your hopes, what it is that you can be, what it is that you can become, what it is that you can achieve, and even what it is that you can have. Let yourself now get in touch with your deepest hopes. I invite you in the stillness to get in touch with these hopes within you, your deepest and truest hopes. I invite you in the silence not only to be aware of these hopes, but to allow yourself to experience a growing faith that all this is meant for you, all this is what you deserve as the offspring, the son, the daughter of God. Be still and know in silence. Now we begin to close this time of meditation and awareness of our oneness with the infinite. We bring our attention back. We call to mind those we love, those we are praying with. We call them to mind and we see them as the very presence of divine life, love, and light. We see the reality behind whatever the surface appearance may be. We hold them in that consciousness and know that as we do, we assist them in attaining their own consciousness of their divinity. We assist them, support them in healing and prospering. Do this in the consciousness of everywhere present infinite love. We bring our attention back. We go forward in confidence, in conviction that divine spirit is now at work in us, through us, and as us, and that all things are unfolding in divine order. This consciousness fills us with gratitude and joy. We accept it in the nature of the Christ within as truth, and so it is. Amen.